Captain Elena Vasquez stared at the strange readings on her screen. The deep space exploration ship Endeavour had been traveling near Proxima Centauri for 3 weeks. The mission was simple: check for any unusual energy signals in the area. But this was not what Elena had expected to find. The signals were too organized to be natural. They pulsed in perfect patterns, like someone was trying to send a message. Elena's heart beat faster as she realized what this might mean. After hundreds of years of searching, humanity might finally have proof that they were not alone in the universe. "Commander Martinez, come look at this. They look like mathematical sequences. Someone is definitely trying to communicate." Elena nodded. "Send a response. Use the basic mathematical greeting protocol we developed for first contact situations." The crew worked quickly to send their reply. Within minutes, something incredible happened. The alien signals changed. They became more complex, more detailed. Then, to everyone's amazement, the signals formed words in perfect English. "Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet in the Sol system. We are Ambassador Kethver of the Zephyrian Collective, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. Your species has reached the minimum requirements for contact. Please prepare to receive our formal invitation." Elena felt her hand shake as she read the message. The Galactic Council. There was an entire council of alien species, and they had been watching Earth. She took a deep breath and responded. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of Earthship Endeavour. We receive your message and are honored by this contact. What are these minimum requirements you mentioned?" The response came quickly. "Your species has achieved faster-than-light communication and has begun experimenting with antimatter manipulation. These are the basic technological standards required for Council membership. However, we must inform you that your species shows concerning patterns." "What kind of patterns?" Elena asked. "Our long-term observations classify your species as Type 7 aggressive expansion. You show moderate intellectual capacity, but have concerning territorial tendencies. Your history includes frequent conflicts over resources and land. This behavior is primitive compared to most Council members." Elena felt her face get hot with anger, but she kept her voice calm. "We have grown beyond those conflicts. Humanity has been at peace for over 50 years. 50 years is barely a moment in galactic time," came the reply. "Most Council species have maintained peace for thousands or even millions of years. However, the Council has decided to offer your species a probationary membership." "What does that mean?" "You may observe Council proceedings for 1 standard galactic year. During this time, you cannot vote on any decisions. You must prove that your species can contribute positively to galactic civilization. If you succeed, you may be granted full membership. If you fail, contact with your species will be terminated permanently." Elena looked around at her crew. They all wore expressions of excitement mixed with worry. This was the greatest moment in human history, but it came with conditions that made humans sound like dangerous children being given a chance to prove themselves. "We accept the invitation," Elena said. "What happens next?" "A delegation of your finest representatives must travel to our central station called Concordia. It orbits the hub world of Nexus Prime in what you call the Andromeda Galaxy. We will provide coordinates and basic travel instructions. Your delegation should include specialists in science, military affairs, and cultural understanding." Elena's mind raced. Andromeda Galaxy was millions of light years away. How are we supposed to travel that distance? Our fastest ships would take millions of years to reach Andromeda. You will be provided with a basic faster-than-light transport vessel. Consider it a loan. If your species fails the probationary period, the vessel must be returned. Over the next several hours, Ambassador Kethver explained more about the Galactic Council. It was a governing body that included 847 different species from 12 galaxies. The Council made decisions about trade, resource distribution, territorial boundaries, and technology sharing. It had existed for over 2 million years. Elena learned that the Council operated on strict rules based on how advanced each species was. The oldest and most advanced species held the highest positions. Species like the ethereals, who were made of pure energy, and the cogitans, who were part machine and part organic, controlled most decisions. Newer species often waited hundreds of years before being allowed to vote on anything important. Your species will start at the bottom, Kethra explained. This is normal. New members must prove their worth before gaining influence. Many species never advance beyond basic membership. How many species have failed the probationary period? Elena asked. There was a pause before Kethra answered. In the last 10,000 years, 43 species have been offered probationary membership. 37 have failed. Most were terminated for being too aggressive or too primitive. 6 succeeded and became basic members. None have ever achieved high-level status in less than 1,000 years. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The future of humanity depended on how well they can impress these advanced alien civilizations. And from what she was learning, the odds were not in their favor. We will need time to prepare our delegation, Elena said. You have 30 of your Earth days, Kethra replied. The transport vessel will arrive at your Mars station on that date. Do not be late. Punctuality is highly valued by the Council. The communication ended, leaving Elena and her crew in stunned silence. They had just made first contact with an entire galactic civilization. But instead of feeling triumphant, Elena felt worried. The aliens clearly saw humans as barely civilized primitives who probably would not succeed. Elena began recording a message to send back to Earth immediately. The world leaders needed to know what had happened and start choosing the best people for this crucial mission. Humanity had dreamed of joining a galactic community for centuries. Now they had their chance, but it would not be easy as the Endeavor began its journey back to Earth. Elena could not shake the feeling that they were about to face the greatest challenge in human history. The galaxy was waiting to see if humanity was worthy of joining them. Elena just hoped that 30 days would be enough time to prepare for what lay ahead. Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her face against the window of the alien transport ship as they approached Concordia. Nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. The space station was enormous, bigger than Earth's moon. It had thousands of docking ports, spinning sections, and massive structures that seemed to defy the laws of physics she knew. Look at the size of that thing, whispered Dr. James Okafor, the physicist who sat beside her. How do they even build something like that? General Maria Santos studied the station with military eyes. The engineering required for that construction is beyond anything we can imagine. We really are the new kids here. Dr. Rashid Al-Mansuri, their cultural expert, was busy taking notes. According to our briefing materials, this station houses over 50 million beings from different species. We need to be ready for anything. Sarah felt nervous but excited. Earth had chosen their delegation carefully. She was a diplomat with experience in difficult negotiations. James was one of Earth's best minds in theoretical physics. Maria had military experience, but also understood strategy and planning. Rashid could speak 12 Earth languages and had studied every alien culture they had information about. The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Sarah took a deep breath as the airlock opened. She was about to become the first human to walk among aliens. Their first surprise was their guide. Sub-Administrator Vex High of the Reptilian Dominance was exactly what his name suggested. A large, lizard-like creature that walked upright. His scales were dark green, and his eyes were yellow with vertical pupils. When he spoke, His voice was deep and sounded like he was always slightly annoyed. "Welcome to Concordia, humans," Vexai said in perfect English. "I am your assigned mentor during your probationary period. Follow me and try not to touch anything important." As they walked through the station corridors, Sarah's head spun, trying to take everything in. Creatures floated past them that looked like jellyfish made of light. Others walked by on 6 legs with shells like giant crabs. Some appeared to be made entirely of metal and crystal. "Your quarters are in Section B7, Vexai explained as they walked. "This is the newcomer section. All species serve their probationary period here before they are allowed to move to better accommodations." "How long do most species stay in the newcomer section?" Sarah asked. Vexai made a sound that might have been laughter. "The Quilani spent 47 years there before advancing to basic membership status. The Vorthok spent 63 years. Your species." He paused and looked at them with what seemed like pity. "Your species will likely be here much longer, if you survive the probationary period at all." Their quarters were small but functional. 4 simple rooms with basic furniture and a common area. The walls had screens that could display information about the station and council activities. Sarah noticed that everything was designed to be used by many different types of beings. Adjustable furniture, multiple types of controls, and universal translator devices. "Your first council session is tomorrow," Vexai told them. "You will observe only. Do not speak unless asked a direct question. Do not ask questions unless it is an emergency. Remember, you are here to learn, not to participate." That evening, the human delegation studied everything they could about council procedures. Sarah read through hundreds of pages of rules and protocols. James tried to understand the advanced technologies mentioned in various reports. Maria studied the council's security arrangements and military policies. Rashid worked on understanding the different alien cultures they would encounter. "The hierarchy here is very strict," Sarah told the others. "The oldest species sit in the inner circle and make the important decisions. Younger species sit in outer circles based on how long they have been members and how advanced they are." "According to these technical reports," James added, "some species have technology we can't even understand. The ethereals can manipulate matter with their thoughts. The Gojans can process information faster than our best computers." Maria looked worried. "Their military capabilities are beyond anything we have. Some species can destroy entire star systems. Others have weapons that exist in multiple dimensions at once." The next morning, they attended their first council session. The main assembly hall was a massive sphere that could hold millions of beings. The humans sat in the very back with other new species, so far from the center that they needed screens to see what was happening. The session was led by Council Director Zielmoth, an ancient being that looked like a floating cluster of lights and geometric shapes. Sarah listened as the council discussed various matters: trade disputes between different galaxies, requests for resource allocation, and reports on new technological developments. What struck Sarah most was how slow and formal everything was. Every decision required multiple committees to study the issue for months or years. When newer species tried to offer suggestions, the older species dismissed them without consideration. The Vegan Trade Coalition requests permission to establish new shipping routes through Sector 7, announced one. "Speaker, the Ethereal High Council finds this request premature," replied a voice that seemed to come from empty air. "The Vegan Coalition has only been a member for 400 years. They lack the experience to manage major trade routes safely." Sarah watched as species after species had their requests denied or sent to committees for further study. The older species seemed to believe that nothing good could come from anyone younger than 1,000 years old. During a break, Vexai approached their group. "What do you think of your first council session, humans?" It seems very thorough, Sarah said diplomatically. Vexai made that sound again that might have been laughter. You think we are too slow and bureaucratic. All new species think this. You will learn that patience and proper procedure prevent disasters. Young species always want to rush into action without thinking. How long does it usually take to make decisions? James asked. Simple matters take 6 to 12 months. Complex issues can take decades. The Council approved the new standardized gravity generators after only 18 years of study. That was considered very fast. Maria looked shocked. 18 years to approve new technology? Young species always focus on speed over wisdom, Vexai said. This is why you remain in the outer circles until you learn patience. That evening, the humans discussed what they had observed. This system is designed to keep new species from having any real influence, Sarah said. By the time a species gains voting rights, they have been here so long that they think like the old species. The technology sharing is completely one-sided, James added. Advanced species give basic information to newer ones, but newer species are never asked to contribute anything. From a strategic standpoint, this makes the Council very resistant to change, Maria observed. That could be a weakness if they ever face a crisis that requires quick action and new thinking. Rashid had been quiet during their discussion. Finally, he spoke. I think we are missing something important. All these species seem to have given up their original cultures to fit into Council norms. They all act the same way, think the same way. Maybe that is the real test. Not whether we can contribute, but whether we are willing to become like them. Sarah felt a chill as she realized Rashid might be right. The probationary period was not just about proving humanity was civilized enough for Council membership. It might be about proving they were willing to give up being human. 3 months had passed since the human delegation arrived at Concordia. Sarah Chun had attended dozens of Council sessions, each one following the same slow pattern. Committees formed to study problems. Reports were written and discussed. Decisions were delayed for further review. She was beginning to understand why Vexai seemed so tired all the time. The humans had settled into a routine. They attended sessions, studied Council procedures, and tried to learn from other species. But Sarah felt like they were just observers in someone else's story. They had not been asked to contribute anything meaningful. That changed on a Tuesday morning when emergency. Alarms began blaring throughout Concordia. All Council members report to emergency assembly. Hall 7 immediately, announced the station's computer system. This is a Category 5 crisis situation. Sarah and her team hurried to the emergency session. The hall was filled with worried beings from hundreds of different species. Council Director Zielmuth appeared in the center of the room, his geometric shape pulsing with urgent light patterns. Citizens of the Council, Zielmuth announced, we face a grave crisis in the Andromeda system. 3 inhabited worlds and 11 research stations are in immediate danger of destruction. A holographic display showed the Andromeda system. Sarah could see the problem immediately. The central star was collapsing in an unusual way. Instead of a normal stellar death, the star seemed to be falling apart in slow motion, creating gravitational waves that were tearing apart everything around it. Our best scientists estimate that the collapse will destroy all life in the system within 6 months, Zielmuth continued. The Galactic Engineering Corps is working on evacuation procedures. Subdirector Veltar of the Engineering Corps took over the presentation. Sarah had learned that the Engineering Corps was run by the Cogitants, the machine hybrid species that considered themselves the galaxy's greatest engineers. We can evacuate all sentient beings within 8 months, Veltar announced. Our evacuation ships are already en route. Unfortunately, all infrastructure will be lost. This includes 17 research facilities, 4 manufacturing centers, and the largest antimatter production plant in the sector. Sarah did quick mental math. The infrastructure loss would cost trillions of credits and set back research projects by decades. Worse, the antimatter plant supplied energy to dozens of nearby systems. What about stopping the collapse? Asked a representative from the Ethereals. Impossible, Veltar replied. We have analyzed every option. The star's mass distribution has become too unstable. No known technology can reverse a cascading gravitational collapse of this type. As the discussion continued, Sarah noticed that Dr. Okafor was doing calculations on his quantum tablet. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, and his expression grew more and more excited. James, what are you working on? Sarah whispered. This collapse pattern, James whispered back. It's not natural stellar death. Something has destabilized the star's core rotation. But the math looks familiar. Familiar how? James showed her his calculations. We dealt with similar gravitational instabilities during the early fusion experiments on Earth. Different scale, but the same basic physics. We developed techniques for using controlled antimatter detonations to stabilize gravitational waves. Sarah felt her heart race. Are you saying we might be able to fix this? Maybe. The approach would be different from what they are trying. Instead of fighting the gravitational collapse, we work with it. Use synchronized antimatter explosions to redirect the gravitational waves instead of stopping them. Sarah looked around the hall. The council was deep in discussion about evacuation logistics. No one was talking about saving the system anymore. She made a decision that would change everything. Excuse me, Sarah said, standing up in the newcomer section. The entire hall went silent. Hundreds of alien beings turned to look at her. Sarah could feel Vex-High's angry stare burning into her back. Council. Director Zilmath's light patterns shifted to what Sarah had learned was surprise. The probationary representative from Earth wishes to speak? Yes, Director. We may have a solution to save the Andromeda system. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then a sound like static filled the hall. Sarah realized it was laughter from dozens of different species. The humans think they can solve a problem that our greatest engineers cannot, said someone from the ethereal section. How amusing. Veltar's mechanical voice carried clear irritation. The newcomers do not understand the complexity of stellar engineering. This is not a problem that can be solved with primitive mathematics. But Director Zilmath raised what might have been a hand for silence. The council recognizes that new perspectives sometimes offer value. State your proposal, human representative. Sarah felt every eye in the hall on her as she stood. Our physicist Dr. Okafor has identified similarities between this gravitational collapse and problems we solved during our fusion development. We propose using synchronized antimatter detonations to redirect the gravitational waves rather than stop them. Impossible, Veltar declared immediately. The precision required would be beyond any species' capability. The timing would need to be accurate to nanoseconds across light years of space. The mathematics are too crude, added an ethereal representative. True stellar engineering requires elegant energy manipulation, not brute force explosions. James stood up beside Sarah. With respect, the approach is simpler than you think. Instead of fighting the collapse, we guide it. Like redirecting a river instead of trying to stop it. The debate that followed was intense. The advanced species were clearly offended that primitive humans thought they could solve a problem beyond the galaxy's best minds. But as James explained his calculations, some of the younger species began asking questions. The approach lacks sophistication, declared the ethereal representative. But the math checks out, admitted a representative from the Quilani, a species that had joined the council only 200 years earlier. After hours of argument, Director Zilmoth made an announcement. The engineering corps will attempt their planned solutions first. If these fail, we will consider the human proposal. Over the next month, Sarah watched as the Council's best engineers tried everything they could think of. Advanced energy manipulation techniques failed. Sophisticated gravitational control systems had no effect. Elegant mathematical solutions proved useless against the raw physics of a collapsing star. With just weeks left before the system was lost forever, Director Zilmoth called another emergency session. The Corps' solutions have not succeeded, he announced. The Council is prepared to authorize the human approach as a final attempt. Sarah felt the weight of the entire galaxy on her shoulders. If they failed, billions of people would lose their homes, and the Council would never trust human judgment again. What resources do we need? She asked. Very little, Veltar said with obvious displeasure. Your approach is so primitive that we do not have the appropriate equipment. You will have to work with basic antimatter charges and simple timing devices. James actually smiled at this. Perfect. Simple tools for a simple solution. The next 72 hours were the most intense of Sarah's life. Working with minimal equipment and constant criticism from Council engineers, the human team coordinated with physicists back on Earth. They calculated timing sequences, planned detonation points, and refined their approach based on real-time measurements from the collapsing system. When the moment came to execute their plan, Sarah held her breath as James triggered the first antimatter charge. Across the Andromeda system, explosions flashed in carefully timed sequence. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the gravitational readings changed. The chaotic collapse shifted into a controlled spiral. The star began to stabilize. 3 hours later, Director Zilmoth announced to the Council that the Andromeda system was safe. The human approach had worked, but instead of celebration, Sarah heard only grudging acknowledgement. The humans were fortunate, declared Veltar. Their crude approach succeeded through luck, not skill. Sarah realized that even saving an entire star system would not be enough to earn real respect. The Council would rather believe in lucky accidents than admit that primitive humans had solved a problem. Their advanced engineers could not. 6 months after saving the Andromeda system, Sarah Chun thought she was getting used to life at Concordia. The humans had gained some respect from younger species, but the older Council members still treated them like lucky children. That changed the day the Void Swarm arrived. Sarah was in her quarters, studying trade regulations when the emergency alarms began blaring. This time, the sound was different, sharper, more urgent. She had never heard these particular alarms before. All Council members to Defense Center Alpha immediately, the station computer announced. This is a galaxy-level threat situation. Repeat, galaxy-level threat. Sarah met her team in the corridor. They had never seen a galaxy-level threat alert before. According to their training materials, such alerts had not been issued in over 10,000 years. The Defense Center was chaos. Hundreds of species were talking at once, while massive displays showed star maps with spreading red zones. Council Director Zilmoth appeared at the center, his light patterns flashing in rapid, panicked sequences. Citizens of the Council, Zilmoth announced, we face an unprecedented threat. Unknown hostile entities have emerged from dark space and are systematically consuming entire star systems. The main display zoomed in on the galaxy's outer edge. Sarah watched in horror as system after system turned red. Each red zone meant billions of dead beings and destroyed worlds. Defense Coordinator Kethzer, a massive crystalline being from the Fortress species, took over the briefing. We designate this threat as the Void Swarm. They appeared simultaneously at 17 points along our outer border. Their technology is unlike anything in our databases. The display showed recordings from the attacked systems. The enemy ships looked organic, like massive insects made of shadow and metal. They moved in perfect coordination, consuming everything in their path. What are their capabilities? Asked General Santos, speaking up from the human section. Unknown, Ketzer replied. They do not respond to communication attempts. Their technology feeds on energy. The more we attack them, the stronger they become. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can develop new ones. Sarah felt cold as she watched the tactical reports. The Ethereals had attacked the Void Swarm with their advanced energy weapons. The swarm had absorbed the energy and grown stronger. The Cogitants had used their most sophisticated war machines. The swarm had learned their patterns and turned their own weapons against them. What is their purpose? Asked a representative from the Ancient Ones. Unknown, Ketzer repeated. They consume all matter and energy in each system, then move to the next. They show no interest in conquest or communication. They simply destroy and move on. Over the following weeks, Sarah watched the Council's response with growing alarm. They formed committees to study the threat. They held debates about proper military protocols. They activated ancient defense systems that had not been used in millions of years. None of it worked. The Void Swarm continued advancing into Council space. Every weapon the galaxy's greatest civilizations used against them only made them stronger. Every strategy failed because the Swarm adapted faster than the Council could change tactics. The reports grew worse each day. The Zephyrian homeworld had fallen. 3 ethereal colonies were consumed. The Cogitants' greatest fortress worlds were overrun. Species that had existed for millions of years were being wiped out in days. Sarah began studying the swarm's attack patterns. Something about their behavior reminded her of Earth's history, but she could not identify what. She spent hours watching combat recordings. Looking for any weakness the Council's military experts had missed. They fight like an invasive species, Dr. Al-Mansuri said one evening as they reviewed the latest reports. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Back on Earth, when invasive species took over new territories, they succeeded because they were different from what the local ecosystem was prepared to fight. The local species had evolved defenses against familiar threats, but not against something completely foreign. James looked up from his calculations. That makes sense. The galaxy's military doctrines are based on millions of years of fighting other Council species. Everyone follows the same basic rules of warfare. But the Void Swarm does not follow those rules, Maria added. They do not care about elegance or efficiency. They just consume everything. Sarah felt pieces falling into place. The Council species have become too advanced. They fight wars like chess games, following ancient strategies and conventions. But the Swarm fights like animals, Maria finished. Like predators who only care about survival. The breakthrough came during another emergency session. Reports were pouring in about the fall of yet another ancient civilization. The Council's greatest military. Minds were running out of ideas. Perhaps we should consider evacuation to the Andromeda Galaxy, suggested one representative. That would mean abandoning our home. Galaxy to these creatures. Council Director Zielmuth replied. Sarah stood up. Once again, hundreds of alien beings turned to look at her. But this time, she was not nervous. Director, the Council has been fighting this war wrong, she announced. The hall erupted in angry sounds from dozens of species. The newcomers dare to question our military strategies? Someone shouted. The humans have no understanding of advanced warfare, declared Kefsar. But Sarah continued speaking. You have been fighting them like they are another Council species. They are not. They are an invasive species, and every world that has ever been invaded knows there is only one way to deal with invaders. And what way is that? Director Zielmuth asked. Sarah took a deep breath. You fight dirty. You use every weapon you have. You break every rule of civilized warfare. You become more ruthless than they are." The silence that followed was complete. Sarah could see shock and horror on the faces around her. The idea of abandoning the Council's civilized approach to warfare was unthinkable to them. "The humans suggest we abandon millions of years of military evolution," Kefsir said slowly. "They want us to fight like barbarians." "Yes," Sarah replied, "because sometimes barbarians survive when civilized people do not." General Santos stood up beside Sarah. "Every species in this council has forgotten what it means to fight for survival. You have had peace for so long that you have forgotten how to be dangerous. Your weapons are too advanced," Dr. Al-Mansuri added. "Your strategies are too elegant. You are trying to defeat chaos with order, but chaos does not follow rules. What exactly are you proposing?" Director Zilmuth, as Sarah looked around the hall. "Let us coordinate a resistance. Not your kind of resistance, our kind. Guerrilla warfare. Asymmetric tactics. Weapons that break your conventions, but work against enemies that adapt." "You want us to become like you," said the ethereal representative with disgust. "Primitive and violent. We want you to survive," Sarah replied. The debate that followed was the most intense Sarah had witnessed. Ancient species that had not disagreed about anything in centuries found themselves arguing about fundamental questions of civilization and survival. Some species were horrified by the human proposals. Others, especially younger species that still remembered struggle, began asking questions about guerrilla tactics and asymmetric warfare. Finally, as reports came in that the Void Swarm had broken through the Council's main defensive lines, Director Zilmuth made an announcement that changed galactic history. "The Council authorizes the human delegation to coordinate unconventional warfare strategies against the Void Swarm threat," he declared. "All member species are directed to provide full cooperation." Sarah felt the weight of the entire galaxy settle on her shoulders. They were about to teach the most advanced civilizations in existence how to fight like humanity had learned to fight over thousands of years of warfare. The question was whether there was enough time left to save them all. Sarah Chun stood in the Council's war room, surrounded by the greatest military minds from 800 different species. Maps showed the Void Swarm advancing deeper into Council space each day. In 3 weeks, they had done something no enemy had accomplished in 2 million years. They had brought the galaxy's most advanced civilizations to the edge of total defeat. "Tell us what you need," Council Director Zilmuth said to Sarah. For the first time since arriving at Concordia, she heard no condescension in his voice, only desperation. Sarah looked at the alien commanders around her. These beings had forgotten how to be afraid, how to take risks, how to win at any cost. But they were about to learn. "First, we stop following your military conventions," Sarah announced. "No more elegant strategies. No more civilized rules of engagement. We fight to survive." General Santos took over the tactical briefing. "The Void Swarm adapts to sophisticated weapons, so we use simple ones. They learn from complex strategies, so we use chaos. They expect rational behavior, so we do irrational things." Over the next week, Sarah watched the galaxy transform. Species that had not built weapons in thousands of years began manufacturing crude but effective explosives. Ancient civilizations learned how to make improvised weapons from scrap materials. Beings that had never known violence learned guerrilla warfare tactics. Dr. Al-Mansuri established communication networks between species that had never cooperated. Old enemies worked together against the common threat. Young species taught ancient ones how to think like predators. The Kulani, who had joined the Council only 200 years ago, became excellent at hit-and-run attacks. The Vorthok learned to use their natural camouflage abilities for ambushes. Even the energy-based ethereals discovered they could fight more effectively by abandoning their elegant combat forms. But the real breakthrough came when Earth's military arrived. Admiral Elena Vasquez, Captain Vasquez's sister, led humanity's first true interstellar war fleet. The ships were ugly, brutal, and designed for one purpose: to kill enemies and keep fighting until they were destroyed. Sarah watched from Concordia's command center as the human fleet engaged the Void Swarm near the Centauri system. The human ships carried weapons that violated 17 galactic conventions on civilized warfare. They used tactics that had not been seen in the galaxy for millions of years. Most importantly, they carried crews that understood something the Council had forgotten. Sometimes winning required being willing to die for victory. Human fleet is engaging the swarm, reported the Cogitant Monitoring Officer. They are using unconventional tactics. Sarah watched as human ships deliberately rammed into swarm vessels. She saw captains detonate their own antimatter cores to take out multiple enemy ships. She witnessed humanity's gift for tactical improvisation as they turned asteroids into weapons and used the swarm's own energy absorption against them. The swarm is having difficulty adapting to human tactics, the monitoring officer continued, surprise clear in his mechanical voice. The humans changed their approach faster than the swarm can learn. The battle was brutal and chaotic. The humans lost 2/3 of their fleet in the first engagement, but they inflicted damage on the Void Swarm that no other force had managed. More importantly, they proved that the swarm could be hurt. General Santos coordinated the galaxy-wide resistance from Concordia. Mixed species teams used human guerrilla tactics across hundreds of systems. They attacked swarm formations from unexpected directions. They used weapons that were too simple for the swarm to adapt to quickly. They sacrificed themselves in ways that saved others. The turning point came when the swarm reached the core systems of the galaxy. They attacked Concordia itself, expecting to destroy the Council's command center and end organized resistance. Instead, they found the entire station rigged with explosives. Sarah stood on the command deck with it. Director Zilmuth as swarm ships surrounded Concordia. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had decided to follow humanity's example. They would die fighting rather than surrender. All stations, prepare for final action, Sarah announced across the galaxy-wide communication network. What followed was the most savage battle in galactic history. Species that had been peaceful for millions of years fought like wild animals. Ancient beings that considered violence beneath them became warriors. The swarm found itself facing not elegant opponents following predictable patterns, but desperate survivors fighting with every dirty trick they could imagine. The battle for Concordia lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the massive station was a wreck. The swarm fleet was destroyed, and something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Swarm formations are retreating on all fronts, reported Admiral Vasquez from her damaged flagship. They cannot adapt fast enough to coordinated chaos. Over the following months, the galaxy-wide resistance drove the Void Swarm back to the dark spaces between galaxies. The final battle was fought in the Void itself, where human-led fleets pursued the retreating swarm and made sure they could never return. Sarah stood in the temporary council chambers that had been set up after Concordia's destruction. Around her, representatives from hundreds of species waited for the post-war session to begin. The crisis is over, Director Zilmuth announced. The galaxy is safe. This session will address several important matters. Sarah felt nervous again. The war was won, but what would happen now? Would the galaxy's ancient civilizations return to their old ways and dismiss humanity once the crisis was past? First, Director Zilmuth continued. The Council formally ends the probationary period for the species of Earth. The requirements have been more than satisfied. There was applause from around the chamber, but Sarah sensed there was more to come. Second, in recognition of their crucial role in saving galactic civilization, Earth is granted a permanent seat on the High Council with full voting rights. More applause, louder this time. Sarah began to smile. Third, the position of Galactic Defense Coordinator is hereby created and offered to the Earth delegation. This position carries authority over all Council military forces and defensive strategies. The applause became a roar. Species that had looked down on humanity 6 months ago were cheering for them now. But Director Zilmoth was not finished. Finally, the Council acknowledges that our ancient ways, while bringing peace, also made us vulnerable to threats we could not understand. The humans have taught us that survival sometimes requires abandoning civilization temporarily to preserve it permanently. Sarah stepped forward to address the Council. Earth accepts all responsibilities offered to us, but we want it understood, if something like this happens again, we will not ask permission to do what needs to be done. For the first time in galactic history, no one argued with the newcomers. Weeks later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the new Concordia station. The galaxy was rebuilding, but it was different now. Ancient species were learning new ways of thinking. Young species were being heard with respect. The rigid hierarchies that had dominated galactic civilization for millions of years were changing. General Santos joined her at the observation window. Think they learned anything permanent from all this? Sarah smiled as she watched mixed species crews working together on construction projects. Look at them. Ethereals working alongside Quilani. Cogitants taking suggestions from species half their age. I think they learned that wisdom without the willingness to fight for it is just advanced helplessness. And what about us? Maria asked. What did we learn? Sarah considered the question. We learned that sometimes the galaxy needs barbarians. We learned that being civilized is a luxury you can only afford when someone else is willing to be uncivilized to protect you. Dr. Al-Manzari approached them with a communication pad. We are receiving requests for military training from 47 different species. They want to learn human warfare tactics. And we will teach them, Sarah replied. Because the next time something like the Void Swarm appears, the galaxy will be ready. As Sarah looked out at the stars, she thought about humanity's journey from primitive newcomers to galactic leaders. They had not gained respect through superior technology or ancient wisdom. They had earned it by being willing to do what needed to be done. No matter how ugly or difficult the galaxy had learned an important lesson about survival. Sometimes you need the young, crude, barbaric species to remind you what it means to fight for everything you care about. Earth had entered the Galactic Council as observers. They had left the galaxy speechless by proving that civilization's greatest strength was not its sophistication, but its willingness to abandon sophistication when survival was at stake. The humans were no longer the newcomers. They were the guardians of a galaxy that had finally remembered what it meant to be dangerous.